Hello. Welcome to day 92. Hands up. Yesterday, I couldn't record. Left it too late, got too tired, and I hadn't even read, so I didn't want to sort of do a quick um, read or something and then jump in. So alas, I just didn't record, and I'm catching up today. So today, we are going from Judges 6 to 9. Um, Interestingly enough, it's one story, pretty much. It's all Gideon's story. So I will not got it up on the screen because well, I can. It's not that deep. I can just get it up on the screen. I'm being lazy. Gideon is my favorite character in the Bible. Um, Outside of Christ, obviously, I should say it's my favorite story in the Bible. Um, Primarily because Gideon, in and of himself, was never the sort of typical hero, right? We kick things off, Gideon, Judges 6. Israel's again fallen away after Deborah. They've turned away from the Lord, and they have um, got that cycle, that this whole Judges cycle has started again, where God has given them over to their enemies. In this case, the Midianites, and it's been 7 years. First thing I want to point out is, let's see, so Judges 6:6. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. The Midianites were like really just bad for them, coming in stealing their crops. Yeah, it was bad. 7 years. It wasn't like someone read a script, read the law, or had a change of heart. It was in Judges 6. Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. Like it strikes me, and I'm not saying this to say Israel was so stubborn it took them being starved for them. I think this is the story of all of us, right? Um, what was I listening to? I can't remember. It's an R&B song. Um, I'm just talking about R&B on Bible study, but hey, um, I can't remember what song it was, but the line was no. I think it was Rihanna. I think it was Rihanna. And it was oh uh da 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 da. Don't tell me you're sorry because you're not, because I know you're only sorry you got caught. Right? It wasn't necessarily that it was a recognition of what they were doing was wrong. I will quote Rihanna in Bible study. There you go. I need to share that with someone. I need to send that in the text. Um, Anyway, yes, it wasn't that it was a recognition that what they were doing was wrong. It was the fact that they got caught that made them sorry. And yeah, I said that to say I think this is the story of the world, right? Sometimes we get so wrapped up in our stupidity that it takes a massive consequence to bring us out of that funk. And I think the only salvageable thing here is the fact that if you are taken out of the funk, then you recognize and run back. There's no harm in that. Like I'm thinking of the prodigal son as well. It wasn't that all of a sudden he recognized, oh, I've wasted my inheritance, or what I did was wrong. It was hunger and not being able to feed himself, and considering eating the food for the pigs that he was slaving away for, that drew him back to his senses. And I think sometimes those consequences, those harsh realities, are just God's way of drawing us back to Him. And they're effective. They are very effective. This is 7 years that Israel had carried on in their ways, right? Until they were reduced to salvation. And then they cried out to the Lord for help. Well, anyway, Gideon is my dude because we meet Gideon at the bottom of a wine press threshing wheat. And I didn't recognize this because I think you need some sort of historical context. But I remember hearing someone preach about this and talking about how him doing this in the at the bottom of a wine press made no sense. Threshing the wheat requires you to have like a wind to blow and to be done outside effectively, but out of fear, and it said there to hide the grain from the Midianites who would come and steal it. He was doing it at the bottom of a wine press, which probably was not efficient, probably made it harder, but he was terrified, right? This isn't your typical hero, terrified. But how does the Lord address him? Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. And it's this idea, I think, that I really love about the story of Gideon, which is he, the reality of who he was in God's eyes was very different from the reality of who he was in his own, and to everyone that would have, would have seen him, to the reader. You're threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press out of fear. You're not. You're not the description of a mighty hero. You know, and it carries on, right? So, um, Gideon here, he's hiding the grain from the Midianites. When he goes to take down his father's idols, which is what the angel eventually commissions him to do, he does so under the cover of night because he's scared. And then lastly, when now this isn't to say, like, the fear isn't to say that he's any less, because what he does is serious, right? He doesn't shy away from anything, even when he's obviously scared. He doesn't shy away from doing it. So it wasn't like because he's scared of taking down his father's idols, he didn't do it. No, he just did it under cover of night. And after that, it's when he goes to fight, he gets 32,000 troops, right? Great. But because like if you go with 32,000, Israel's going to say that they just fought their way out. Whittles it down to 300. And God then gives him like if you're scared, go and listen. So he gives him another sign, right? So he goes to listen to a dream and its interpretation. And then he's able to go. But that's the other thing, right? Even though he's scared, he goes, right? And further to that point, Gideon also kept on asking for a sign. When he was first met by the Lord at that wine press, he said, "Okay, if you're going to do me, let me go and then give me a sign. Let me go and grab and cook some food, bring it." And God consumed it and said, "Okay, cool." When it came time to fight, he said, "Okay, give me a sign." The fleece, wow, fleece wet, ground dry. That wasn't enough. Fleece dry, ground wet. And then that last dream and interpretation. And so Gideon remains like consistently um, fearful, but also conversely bold every time that he confirms God is with him, right? And does bold things. But yeah, that's why I really love Gideon, and I've sort of talked through pretty much Gideon, Judges 6. Um, yeah, and then in Judges 8, 7, sorry, he finally defeats the Midianites with those 300. In fact, God causes them to fight amongst themselves, and He chases them down. And we have this two characters, Zeba and Zalmunna. Reminds me of Zamunda, um, that he chases down and chases through two towns who refuse to help him out, even though it's just him and 300. Um, and I need to look into them because just stand out in a weird way, right? It's yeah. Anyway, he does all that, and then he creates this sacred ephod, which, by all indications, might not have been used for what he intended them to be used for, because Israel then worships it and is described as a trap for Gideon and his family. Um, but that was sort of interesting. In Judges 8:28, we see that Gideon also sort of ruled as a judge for about 40 years. That's the other thing as well. Israel tried to get Gideon as their king, and this is again instance of Israel not recognizing that God wanted to be their king, rejecting him for a man. In this case, Gideon, who had had done had fought for them, and he rejects it, thankfully. But alas, it's yeah, they prostitute themselves and worship the ephod made out of gold. But then the story sort of goes left after Gideon dies. Israel again sort of uh, what's it called? Prostitute themselves and worship Baal, and um, God is about to turn them over again. But it's interesting, right? Because we have this side story in chapter 9 with Abimelech and Gideon's 70 sons. And Abimelech is one of his sons, but is like a concubine's daughter, so not really a half brother, not really legitimate. And he just ups and kills all of his brothers. One gets out, Jotham, but Abimelech just comes, kills his brothers, says he wants to be a ruler over Israel, and the people of Shechem sort of support him because his mother was of Shechem. And Jotham, the youngest who escaped, gave a parable, which was also sort of pretty much a curse, about how they've made Abimelech their king. Um, and then he sort of escapes. But after 3 years of Abimelech ruling, uh, they have some tensions between Shechem and Abimelech, and they get into an all-out war, and it ends up with Shechem, many men of Shechem dying, but also Abimelech effectively being killed when a woman drops a stone on his head, a millstone on his head, and then he tells his young armor bearer to kill him. And so it was a really weird turn with the children of Gideon. Um, and yeah, I've never really noticed that before. I've heard the stories, but I never connected them properly. Um, so it just, yeah, struck me that it sort of all went left. But yeah, that's yesterday and today, Judges 6 to 9 effectively. And tomorrow we'll go to Judges 10.